Hey there everyone, Rob here from the Better SMB. Let me give you a date, 7th of November. It is important because that is election date. That is when we choose our representatives to go down to Wellington to bat for us as SMB owners, leaders, managers, everyone who does the hard mahi every day, every week. This is also important for us because an interesting fact, it was the Greens Party 3 years ago that had the only documented, written down policy directly supporting SMBs. No other party talked directly to small businesses around New Zealand. So David and I wanted to change that leading up to the 7th of November. Today is the first in that series. We hear from Laura McClure from the ACT Party. We get to know Laura as a business owner as well as a politician. And we also hear about the ACT views on businesses, what it's got up its sleeve, and how that relates to SMBs around New Zealand. Also, we want to hear from all the major parties in the future. This is not a gotcha tactics interview. We just ask questions and listen with curiosity. It's a really interesting insight session. Now, before we go on and listen to Laura, yes, I'm going to be the Chief Reminding Officer. Please like, share, do all the things that you can do to support the Better SMB podcast. Anyway, that's from me. Let's go and listen to the ACT Party, Laura McClure. On with the show.
Welcome back to the Better SMB, where we're on a mission to lift New Zealand's productivity by helping small and medium business leaders take practical steps to improve their business performance, starting today. I'm David Altiner.
And I'm Rob Bull.
We've created this platform to spark a movement. Our BHAG is to get 100,000 businesses, that includes 15,000 manufacturers, on a journey of continuous improvement. Through the podcast, our monthly column, The Last Word, a New Zealand manufacturer, and our growing community, we're building a trusted voice for SMB leaders, offering the inspiration, insight, and implementation support they need to build high-performing, future-ready businesses. According to Stats NZ, in February 2025, there were almost 2.5 million people in New Zealand employed by businesses and 423,000 who are self-employed. About half of those people are employed by businesses with more than 100 team members. 500,000 or so are employed by businesses with 20 to 99 team members, leaving 1.1 million people as being self-employed or working in a business with under 20 team members. They employ over a third of our working population. They're the butcher, the builder, the bookkeeper, the manufacturer, the retailer. They're the texture of our nation and economy, and for years, possibly decades, they've been carrying a regulatory and legal burden that was designed by people who have never signed a payroll or lost sleep over an employment dispute. Today, we have a guest with experience working as a business owner and who is now in politics and is pushing hard on employment law reform, cutting red tape, and creating a small business policy agenda that reflects what it feels like to run a business in this country. With a general election on the horizon, there's never been a better time to have this conversation. I'm pleased to welcome Laura McClure, ACT Party MP, and the person in the ACT Party specifically tasked with fighting for the interests of our small and medium businesses. Welcome to the podcast, Laura.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for having me.
No trouble. So before Parliament, you worked in and helped grow a small business, and it turned into a national fire safety consultancy. What did that experience teach you about the real cost of being a small business owner in New Zealand?
Yeah, look, a couple of things, but before I point those out, I think scaling up is always challenging and for any small business in New Zealand. So I think that would be one of the first things. The things that really surprised me was employment law. It's super complex and really expensive if you get it wrong for a small business. So that would probably be my key thing. And secondly, doing business in Auckland is much harder than anywhere else in the country. There's the travel costs, distances are further, plus the time you actually spend in the car between seeing clients and jobs, and there's more competition, so often your margins are actually smaller too. So that was something those are the two key things that I noticed when we were expanding the business.
Because the business grew out of Christchurch, was it?
Yeah, that's right. So my parents started the company 30 years ago, or 35 years ago now. So it was mainly a mainland business down in the South Island. And then my husband at the time and I decided we were going to expand into the North Island because we were living up in Auckland with a young family. So yeah, it was a bit of a mission, but it was absolutely worth it.
Brilliant. So if we look at that and we drill into, so it sounds like you had quite a ride. And of course, yeah, you're right. Once you're in Auckland, those distances are pretty crazy. So if we get into what you took away from that, what were some of the key lessons for you?
Yeah, the key lessons are like you have to be prepared for things, like the trajectory is not always like incremental, grow. It can be a bit of a roller coaster, and you need to be prepared for that. And, like anybody who's started out and worked for themselves will know you also need to be prepared to pay yourself a lot less than possibly what your previous job or career was. And that can be challenging, but the payoff is worth it when you get there in the end. Nothing beats working for yourself, being able to set your own scheduled hours, actually showing up to kids' sports if you're a parent, because you now can do. Because on the flip side, you'll work till midnight, to make up for it. But that flexibility, I think, is really key. And for me, it is putting in the hard yards, but investing in the future and knowing that you might have to take a bit of a hit to start with. And so I guess part of that is having that capital in behind you, whether it's your own personal savings or something that you can piggyback on until you get yourself really well established.
So I spent a bit of time listening to your maiden speech, and I liked how you talked about this idea that you were actually paid to help businesses navigate red tape that came out of Parliament. So while you were in that role, what did that show you about the gap between the policy intent for the people governing the country and the reality down at the business level?
Yeah, look, it's always ironic to people that I'm with the ACT party, given that ACT is all about, less regulation, smaller government, etc. Yet I was making money off essentially regulation and charging people for it. Look, the things that I noticed, there was a couple of things. Being a small business owner myself, I realized all of the ridiculous things that I needed to do in the background that you just don't consider. And I always use the analogy of like the bike guy, the guy that mountain bikes here in Christchurch, goes up to the adventure park, is amazing at mountain bikes, knows everything about those bikes and decides he wants to set up a shop. But then there's all these extra things in the background that you have to do. And some of those things, they really add value, and some of those things you're basically just ticking boxes, someone's clipping tickets. Being a member of parliament and looking around and seeing my colleagues, not many of them have actually owned a business, let alone a small business. A lot of them, most of them are really professional, think lawyers, doctors, etc. And their policy intent can be really good, and it may be that they're wanting to, reduce risks of death or serious harm, for example. They might be wanting to stop tax fraud, all these kind of things. And that the intent's really good there, but it actually doesn't marry up to what it's like to be on the ground. And in fact, sometimes the intent, it doesn't actually have the impact at all that they intended. And in fact, it's just costing everybody else that is really trying to implement it. So yeah, I think that was something that I noticed before I got into Parliament. It's something I started to notice, and it's something I really notice now that I'm there.
What do you think those people need to hear from the bike guy or the butcher or whoever it is operating their business about the impact or lack of impact that some of those policies have?
I think they need to get out there and actually go and see what it's like to be in these businesses and actually meet these people and talk to them. Because it feels like so often that actually when I go out and talk to a small business owner, like your butcher, your hairdresser, they've never really been visited by anybody in government, let alone a member of parliament. And I think a lot of the MPs don't understand the impacts of what their policy or legislation may actually have on these guys. So I would say more consultation, whether it's a government agency, whether it's a member of parliament, whoever it is that is looking to implement a new policy direction, I think that consultation with the people it's really going to affect is quite important. Not just the consultancy academics and the people that are good at writing things and good at doing detailed research. It's actually really the people on the ground that you need to speak to first.
Who's doing that well of the colleagues that you rub shoulders with?
I'm going to sing out Brooke Van Velden, and I know that seems I'm coming from ACT Party, but when she started or announced her health and safety reforms, straight away she said, right, I'm going to go do a roadshow, I'm going to head out across the country, and she did. She went pretty much everywhere, talking to business owners via the business chambers where a lot of our SMEs are, set up in, and actually saying, hey guys, what is the issue that you're finding and where are the issues? And I think she's done a really good job at that. There are other ministers and government agencies that are doing similar kind of things, but not really to that extent, because I think it takes a really special person to say, I don't have all the answers, so I actually want to hear from you about what they could actually be, because quite often our MPs, particularly our ministers, want to tell you how things should be done because they want to look like they've got all the answers, and that's just, for me, I think it's a really silly way of doing things. And I think the way that Brooke's done that consultation was really unique, and I've really enjoyed watching the outcomes that are coming from that now and seeing the implementation and the rollout of what's coming in the future.
Brilliant. So we won't get you to shame colleagues who aren't doing a good job. So you were out there in the capitalist world. You've got a nice little niche where the government's creating all these problems for businesses that you're helping solve.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it? What was the problem that made you think, you know what, I'm going to pack all this away, and this matters enough for me to want to go to Wellington, go through an election cycle, put my name out there, I want to be an MP?
Yeah, look, there was a couple of things, but one of them really was around the tick box culture and health and safety in general. And it felt like we had gone from a culture of she'll be right, think pre-Pike River Mine days, to tick all these boxes, give me your money and I'll certify you and we'll move on. And I follow statistics, and not only were we not getting safer, statistically more serious harm events and deaths were actually occurring. We're in a bit of a peak trajectory because there are specific industries where we see an increase in kind of like those kind of harms, and yet the rules that came out applied to everybody, blanketed. And so not only were we not really getting safer, we're just costing people an awful lot of money. That is one thing. Second is something called orange fatigue. Have you heard of orange fatigue?
Oh, I think I know where this is going, but yeah, go.
You might do. I mean, you might think road cone, but being in health and safety myself, I really care about people going to work and coming home safe, and making sure that businesses can comply where possible. They're not doing things that don't add value and will actually keep people safe. And something that I noticed over time, over a period of 10 or so years, was what I call orange fatigue, is when we are high-vising everything, whether it's the road cones, whether it's, high-vis vests, whether it's signs overload. We get to a point in time where people actually switch off when they see that. They don't actually anymore see that as a hazard. They see that as business as usual. And then, you're driving down the road, you miss the worker on the side of the road because it's just another set of road cones that have been out for months on end. And actually, it creates a bit of a culture around the orange or the high vis no longer actually being a warning anymore. But we get complacent as humans, and it's just the way that we adapt. And I believe that is actually where we're at right now. And it's a dangerous place to be in. So we have to peel that back as much as we can to the things that are actually going to keep us safe, and not the things that are going to make us actually potentially a lot unsafer, not to mention unproductive and all those other things.
Couldn't agree more. It's almost like when everything's important, nothing's important, right? And you have all your little worker people running around in high vis.
Totally.
I can see how it gets easy to not see that.
Absolutely. If you're ticking boxes, you forget the one thing that might actually keep you safe when you're ticking a whole bunch of other things, right? And you need to keep things simple.
So ACT, and you've been touching on this already, you're arguing that regulation's holding back national productivity.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a concrete picture. What does that look like in the day-to-day life of a small business owner? So let's stay away from the construction example. That was great, and I think it is a good example. But what other ones do you see out there?
Oh gosh, there is so much. Like, where do we start? So whether it's, health and safety, even in an office environment, you're meant to go around and check, are there like, is the filing cabinet overfilled? Is it going to fill out and like hurt somebody? But so we say health and safety, then there's compliance, there's building warrant of fitness checks, there's fire checks. And I mean, I come from the fire background and I know most of those are actually really needed, but again, they just add to the box, sometimes unnecessary. Employment relations laws, professional registrations potentially, export certificates, then industry specific legislation, council operating requirements, resource consent. I don't know, there's so much. I could keep going on and on about what there is. And look, there is so much. Quite often, people don't even realize what it is when you're starting out a business, what you actually have to adhere to. And in fact, there's not even a one-stop shop where you can go to find out what it is you'll have to adhere to. So there is so much.
I have my own little at-home story with regulation. We put in a, whatever it is, 4x3 metre cabin on our section, meant to be able to do that without a consent.
Yeah.
So it turns out we built close enough to our boundary that we needed to pay for a consent exemption.
Oh, gosh.
So we spent, I'm pretty sure it took about a month and a half to get a consent exemption, which in itself makes no sense and feels like an Excel circular reference. But it was just bizarre. I see that now finally got rid of that. But yeah, there's certainly plenty of that out there.
Oh,
now,
absolutely.
In your maiden speech, you used the line, "all that glitters is not gold," to describe the laws that sound good but don't always deliver. Have you got a great example, or maybe a couple of good ones, where the intent was good but the outcome for SMEs was poor?
Yeah, look, I think the really obvious one is probably the health and safety reforms that happened back in 2015. We had, after Pike River Mine, we needed to do better and there needed to be something in place. We had a government who set up essentially an act, created a regulator, and then didn't really make any regulations or any specifics about how to comply with these things. And so a cottage industry has popped up over time to help businesses comply, and how to comply has become challenging, and it's all over the show depending on who you talk to. So I would say by far that has been one of the single biggest issues our small businesses have faced, for sure, when it comes to a good idea that has turned bad. There's honestly pieces of legislation everywhere that are like this, and part of the reason that my boss, David Seymour, wanted to set up the Ministry of Regulation was to actually tackle these bits of law that may be just old and outdated, but also may have been quite new and had a good intent, but then on the ground is actually not working. And he's finding there's a tip-off line for bad regulation. So if you've got a bad regulation, you can go to the regulation red, I think it's a red tip-off line or something along those lines. So you can go there and you can let the Ministry of Regulation know what the regulation is that is bugging you or your business, and why you think it needs to go or needs to change, and they can investigate into that. And at the moment, they're systematically going through all these complaints. So yeah, there's heaps. Lots out there, but overall I'd say health and safety reform was probably the biggest example of great intention, really poor outcomes at the end of the day.
So Rob's got his own little small business, and now he's got another small business that he has recently just purchased.
Nice.
Anything there, Rob, that we can get to the tip-off line for you?
No, I was just curious. One, because I haven't heard too much media attention around that tip-off line, so I've forgotten all about it. So do you know how often it's been accessed, or the amount of sort of tip-offs there are?
Quite a lot. I mean, one of the most recent ones, I guess, that's been addressed was the hairdressers and barbers being able to give like a glass of bubbles or wine or a beer on their premises, was something that someone tipped off to that line, and they said, hey, this is quite ridiculous, particularly like hens parties and things, or bridal parties, wanting to have one wine. And a lot of hairdressers didn't even realize that they were breaking the rules. And actually, when they went deeper into that, they found that even serving a drink at all, whether it's a cup of tea or a coffee, was in fact against the regulations in itself. So that is something that got addressed. But yeah, they get complaints all the time. I don't have exact figures or numbers for you, but I can probably get those for you if you're interested.
More of a curiosity, but absolutely. I think it is those rules that you don't realise you're breaking.
I think so too.
I think it's all of those regulations that you go through day to day. And like I go into a lot of different organizations, manufacturing, right through to office and service industries. So, and everyone takes a different approach. Certainly the manufacturing industry have sharpened their pencil around health and safety over the 10 years I've been working in there, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, probably is in some of those manufacturing.
Some of those,
I'd
it's
say.
been a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
A few that were a little bit ropey, but it's those ones because, the other business that we just brought was a bookstore, and if we want to host events and, have our author come in or do a teacher's education evening and throw them a bottle of Pinot Gris, we would have been breaking the law. Whereas we thought that that's just good business. And being obviously responsible host with food and all of that kind of stuff, but it's that food prep. So I think it's the ones that you don't realise you're breaking rather than the obvious ones. So
I might have just found one. Section 16 of the Summary Offences Act 1981, acting as a medium with intent to deceive. So it is an offence to be paid to pretend to act as a spiritualistic medium or to claim telepathy, clairvoyance, or similar powers with intent to deceive. The penalty is a fine of up to $1,000. So you can be a paid psychic if it's entertainment.
I was about to say, how do they get away with it then when they host shows, etc.? That's a very interesting one.
We won't go for some of the other ones that are suggested. Anyway, there's a counter-argument that regulation protects workers and consumers. How do we get the balance right between protecting people but not crushing responsible small business owners?
Yeah, look, it is a balancing act, and we do need some regulation, and particularly health and safety is really important, which I think I alluded to in the start by saying, I care deeply about health and safety, but we do need to balance it by, does it actually add value? Is it actually going to make something safer or better? And what is the cost versus the benefit of all of this? And I think when you can answer those questions well, you get to a place that you need to be. But right now, we know there is an awful lot of ticking boxes just to comply, paying somebody else in order to comply, essentially, so that you can carry on and do the business that you need to do in order to get paid. That's not a good culture for anybody to be in.
Agree. Now, you got a members' bill and it's passed its first reading. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Tell us about it. What's the problem it's trying to solve for small employers?
Yeah, so this members' bill has been coined the Golden Handshake Bill, and it's essentially a change to our Employment Relations Act that they have in the UK, Canada, Australia has something similar. And what it does is it allows an employer to ask an employee to have a conversation about their employment. It doesn't necessarily have to end in we want to move you on. It could be about performance, etc. But what it does is it means that particular conversation can't be used for a PG. And it means that an employer can have an honest conversation with an employee. And it could even be, I want to talk to you about the fact that when I'm not doing great, the business isn't doing great, I might have to make you redundant. And it might just be those honest conversations that we know, particularly our small businesses, want to be able to have. But because it's considered a predetermined outcome potentially, even mentioning anything along those lines would be classed as a PG. So asking an employee to have a conversation with you about their employment, they can choose yes or no to have that conversation. Is up to them. But if they want to have that conversation with you, you're able to discuss all kinds of things to do with employment. And if it is that the employment relationship's broken down, things aren't working, you are wanting to move them on, then you can offer them potentially a sum of money. That's up to you how you do it. Or it might be that you want to offer them some time to find something else, good reference. It really depends on the circumstances, and that's where it's open for employer and employee to discuss what actually is going on, what it actually will it take for things to end in a good way rather than the way that things are ending right now because of the mechanisms that we have to use as an employer when things haven't worked out. And even just being able to have an honest chat about performance without it going down a risk of a PG and a big trajectory of things. I think there's a lot of things that we can't do at the moment that I think is not benefiting employees either, but definitely not employers.
So is that for every business, or is that for a certain size business?
Yeah, look, it is actually for every business. So the bill has been read, went through the first reading. It got support from the coalition partners at the time on the first reading to select committee. The select committee have scrutinised the bill. They've put in a few safeguards, which happy to discuss with you. And then they've also recommended that the bill be passed back to the House. So it's just sitting ready to be read again. However, New Zealand First have sort of indicated that they don't want to support it anymore. So I have put that on hold currently while we can see if I can get them across the line. It's not a coalition deal. I'm not a government minister, so I've really got to lobby any members to vote for this bill, or I'll be taking it to election if that doesn't happen. But I think the bill's in a really good place. The select committee have had experts on it. They've done a really good job with the bill and improved it quite a bit.
You said they added a couple of things. What were those?
They were just things around making sure that the employee is protected. So around like timeframes, how long do you give an employee to make a decision if they want to have this conversation or not? Allowing them to seek legal advice, which actually my bill did have in it as well, but making it explicit. How much time they've got to think about an offer, and a cool down period, for example, if they do accept an offer. And that way it just protects you from the employer, from the risk of them saying they were pressured into it as well. So it kind of goes both ways. And also ensuring that if an employer acts really inappropriately, that there's, during those meetings, that there is still some mechanisms there, not for the normal PG of just having this conversation, but if they did the really inappropriate stuff, that would be considered a PG, making threats, all of those kind of stuff. I think we strike the balance pretty well with it. And to be honest, I talk to a lot of employees about what has happened with them, whether they've gone managed out of positions via performance management, whether they've gone down the track of being made redundant when they know that they know their employer wants to move them on, and how much stress that is. And then eventually they end up in the without prejudice conversations that we could have had at the start, and money exchanges hands, but lawyers make an awful big cut, and sometimes those sneaky employment advocates as well.
Yeah, I've certainly seen a fair bit of that across the different organisations I've worked in, that's for sure. So if we take on the small business owner perspective, how much does that risk of personal grievance actually affect their hiring decisions?
I actually think it's a huge factor. When I talk to across a lot of businesses, not just our SMEs, but when I go out and I talk to them, the costs involved with taking somebody on, investing in them, training them, and if that doesn't work out for some reason, it's really, really expensive and really hard to end that employment relationship, even with the 90-day trials, for example, which are great, and it's awesome that we've brought those back. But sometimes things happen 6 months down the track. That risk of getting the wrong person or not making the right fit in a small business can really change the whole entire dynamic and culture of the business. So we're talking small teams, it's not the same as a large business where people can be moved to another manager, for example, or moved even branch potentially. Like we don't see that at all with our small businesses. So that risk, sometimes an employer says, it's too hard. I'm gonna burn out myself. I'm not gonna hire somebody, or I'm gonna put pressure on the staff that I do have now. And I think it's not doing any of us any justice at all.
So you've got a few critics, and they're saying it could make it easier to push workers out. Mm-hmm. And you've touched on some of the protections, calling off periods and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But what do we need to put in place that vulnerable workers aren't just pressured into agreements that I guess broadly they don't want?
Yeah, look, I think the very fact that it has to be mutual upfront is the good starting place. The fact that they can seek legal advice, and if you're unionised, your union rep, for example, they're able to think about the offer, that cool down period like I discussed, all of these things, really important protections. But also we've got to think about, as a business owner, and I've not met a single small business owner or business owner that has said that they would want to just hire and fire at will. That is not what happens. That whole entire cultural shift around employer versus employee is a problem in itself here in New Zealand, because I think most employers, there's always going to be a small majority that aren't, but most employers put an awful lot of time and investment in their staff. And if things are working out, things are going well, they want to keep you. This whole idea that employers just want to use this to be able to hire and fire is not true. I think if employers are having these conversations, something is not working out. And it's better to have those conversations for both parties early on rather than having them, 6 months down the track when both parties have spent an awful lot of time, stress and money, because it costs both sides if that happens.
Fundamentally, we want an environment where it's about mutual success, right? Someone
That's right.
is operating a business, they're bringing people in, those people can be successful under that umbrella, and everyone wins.
Yeah, it's about creating a framework where it's not pitting either employee or employer against each other. It's about entering into that relationship where you can actually have these discussions, and it's not always going to end in, a massive legal bill at the end of the day.
Exactly. Now, ACT talk about lifting national productivity through deregulation and market freedom. Our view at the Better SMB is that the biggest productivity lever or the biggest business performance lever is often leadership capability within the business.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that sit in the party's thinking, your thinking?
I think you're right. I think a lot of it does come from great leadership within a business. It's all about the people that you have and the culture that you set and the environment that you have within the workplace. From an ACT perspective, we're thinking about what can we control from a government's lever, not what you should control as the business owner. So I think when you look at it through that lens, ACT is totally thinking about how can we make things easier? How can we get government out of your way so that we're not holding you back or dragging you down? But I agree with your point. I think that fostering great leadership and making sure the workplace culture is good is where you're going to see huge productivity gains, because we all know that if people are happy, they're happy to go to work, they enjoy their job, you're going to get a lot more out of them at the end of the day. And a lot of that comes from that decent leadership.
I will put out a bit of a acknowledgement here because I am a provider of Task Callaghan innovation services. So with that capability development around our SME owners, yet this last government culled a lot of funding that went directly into that ability to grow the skill sets and the knowledge and the abilities of our SME owners. How does that sit?
Yeah, look, I think there's a couple of things. If we are going to have any kind of like innovation fund, or we're going to have any type of incentives to help businesses grow, they have to be really targeted. And what we were seeing, and this is my observation with Callaghan, is it wasn't really like industry growth specific. It was really just, let's hand this out all over the show. And as a tax-paying Kiwi, I think we need to be really mindful about where we're spending money when we've got a government that's servicing just $9 billion of interest on our debt a year. It's like insane. So we have to think about where we're going to be spending money. And if we are going to be giving any kind of R&D, research and development funding, any kind of incentives, I believe that they actually need to be really targeted to industries that we think or we see are going to give huge potential as far as growth goes for New Zealand. And I think that is something that whatever government is in next, they should really consider how they do that and how well they do it. And I know there have been quite a few businesses and people that have been disappointed with the changes in some of that funding model. And I 100% can see that because it's a really tough economic environment that we are operating in right now. But the government has to tighten its belt. If it doesn't, we'll see more and more inflation, and that just brings up all of the costs on all of us, including ourselves in business.
So is that not a little bit counterintuitive of reducing access to support, to lift up capability, to lift up our business performance so that we do earn a lot more? Yeah, I agree. There was some loose edges on some of that criteria, and I'm not even talking about R&D or innovation. It's just that simple capability of business owners, because in New Zealand we've talked about it a lot on this podcast. It's so easy to create a business and start up a business because we love what we do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that we're good at leading that business or running that business. What's in the pipeline from the ACT Party around that?
Yeah, look, you do make a good point, and I do think having a place where you can go if it is government supported or it's, government backed, that directs us to the right places of how, we need to comply with things, where we need to go as a business, how to access capital, growth, all of those kind of things. I think it's really important. I think the way the Callaghan Fund was set up is just not the right mechanism for that. I can't give you any kind of key insights yet into policy because we haven't actually announced our business policy yet. But I do think that they're really valid points, and I'll take those on board when we are thinking about our upcoming policies.
No shadow policies, no sort of hints, direction.
Oh, look, I think where I'm looking at the moment is things like duplication. How can we help with duplicate compliance, I'd say, local government and central government, overlaps in regulations and rules, trying to stop that duplication. I think that would be a really good step. Government procurement, government and central government and local government's really hard. Their procurement settings aren't great and they don't back our New Zealand companies first, but also just applying for a tender if you're a SME is really challenging. So I think we can improve on that. There are loads of different areas that I'd like to talk to you about, but these are kind of where I'm heading at the moment and what I'm looking at. The other things could be, tax incentives, tax breaks for certain businesses that are investing in like-minded or similar new tech, for example. But yeah, all of that is all policy shopped, and you guys are talking out there to small businesses all the time. So I'm keen to hear your ideas of what you think is needed as well.
I've just finished watching all the news come through from the Icehouse Ignite conference, which was AI this, AI that.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, so I work in the tech space, and technology is often sold as the golden bullet to lift national productivity, AI, automation, digital tools. But what I see out there is that most businesses lack the fundamentals. And you need those fundamentals before you can invest in tech so that you can move the needle on performance. So what's your view on the relationship between our current business capability, technology, and real performance gains?
Yeah, I think you've really touched on the fact there that you need those fundamentals in place. And let's be real, you need the finances to be able to invest in these new technologies as well. I do think AI offers a lot of potential, and New Zealand has been quite slow to adopt it. I think EY did a report late last year or start this year that is basically critical of New Zealand and Australia, and our uptake in AI has been really slow. If you've got a manufacturing business, automation's great. All of these things, though, they cost a lot of money. And like you said, you've got to have the fundamentals in place in order to be able to adopt these technologies and do well. So, yep, I think we're going to see productivity gains, but you need to know what the productivity gain is that you're targeting and where you're going to go and what you're going to achieve first, right? I mean, and you've got to have the capital to be able to invest in some of these. So some of it can be nice and cheap and easy to use AI, but at the same time, some of them actually could be really expensive if you're in manufacturing, for example. You don't want to get that wrong.
So I heard Nicola Wallace last week, I don't remember what day it was, but she said there's no barriers in place to stop banks lending to businesses.
Wow.
Now, the interesting thing, we've talked about this on a couple of episodes. If you give your money to the bank and the bank is then loaning that money out to businesses, right, you fundamentally have no say, but you'd hope that your bank is being prudent with how they're lending that money out. I think our businesses lack the ability to access funding because they don't have those fundamentals in place, which actually means that our businesses look like a bad risk to a bank. I know it's a lot more complex than this, but that's broadly why banking favours lending on houses. Because if you're a business owner, you go to the bank, can I have $1 million, want to buy a piece of something or other that's going to do this for my business? When they can't present that, the business case for that, the next question from the bank is, do you have a house, right?
Yeah.
So we have this problem at a business level that we can't access capital. But then I also see that we have that problem at a national level where we struggle to bring in foreign direct investment.
Yep.
Do you have a view on that?
You're absolutely right. Like banks, they do their own risk assessment. They know that that property, physical property, is far more safer than a business. Part of that as a business has been able to show that you've got stable financials and been able to prove that over a certain period of time. But I've heard of businesses that are, really stable over a 10-year period of time, and they're still struggling to lend, and they want the backing of your own property, for example. So I do think there is an unwillingness to invest in business, and I don't know if that is because the banks are just being really risk adverse, or whether it is the fact that actually, some businesses might not have their ducks in a row and it is riskier to invest in business. I mean, okay, maybe you're a foreign investor, maybe you're a domestic investor and you've got 100K to invest in something. I mean, putting it in property right away, you're not going to be hit with tax, for example. Not right away, you're not. It's a long-term, more sure and safe investment, right? You throw that into a business, already the business is paying tax on that. There's all kinds of other risks that could potentially occur with that. But at the same time, there's lots of growth that could happen. So, look, I don't have the answers. I think the banks are a little bit risk adverse. I think that foreign investment into New Zealand's been really hard and challenging, and there's lots of reasons for that, and it depends on the industry. Like Resource Management Act hasn't helped anybody want to bring money here to actually build a big business, for example, or build into property, because that Resource Management Act's been all over the show, and they just take one look at that and think, oh my gosh, what is that? The goalposts move continually during a consent process. Why would I invest in something where I can't actually see what the cost is going to be straight up front? And that uncertainty has been really, I think, a big disadvantage for us here in New Zealand as far as getting that international capital in on some of the newer things or newer potential opportunities. But the other thing is we're also taught at school, or taught from a very young age in New Zealand, and this could be in most Western democracies, that having that physical land asset is the key to all financial success in the future. Whereas investing money, whether it's into a business, whether it's into the stock market, is considered far more riskier. And it's because we don't know how to do it, and we don't know how to do it well. So there's actually, I don't know if you guys saw, but there was an ACT policy that David Seymour's been floating around kids that are studying things like economics at school, getting them a Sharesies account, and $500 that would normally go into part of the KiwiSaver startup goes into an account similar to Sharesies, so that they can learn about investing in a business, investing into potentially the stock market, for example. So I think it's a cultural thing as well.
That's a great idea. Just got to say, getting students thinking about that early enough. I mean, if you can, I forget the exact number, but it's something like $100 a month or something from 18 to age 60, invest in something that returns reasonably well, you've got $1 million.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like the understanding the power of compounding interest, and the fact that even though people view the share market as risky, $100 of your own money every month, that's not risky. There's no leverage, there's no lending. The more we can lift the financial capability of our young people and our population, the better off our entire business environment's going to be.
Absolutely. There'll be more money then to spend on things like venture capital, to spend on businesses that might seem riskier. But at the moment, I think it's just everybody is risk adverse. And that's partially because we're not educated to know anything different, right?
Yeah. Now, if you had a room full of 500 small business leaders, what's the single thing you'd tell them that ACT stands for in plain English?
Look, I'd say, ACT stands for smaller government, delivering essentials very well. We're future-focused party. We're not, let's make New Zealand great again. We're like, let's make New Zealand the best possible place it could be. We want to back business by getting government out of the way via less rules, regulations. And ultimately, we also believe in values like treating everybody as equal, uniting us on the things that we actually have in common and not dividing ourselves. So I say those are just some of the key things that ACT stands for, and things that we wish to deliver to create that prosperous future for New Zealand.
Love it. That sounds awesome.
Nice. You want to be there, right?
Totally.
You want to stay in New Zealand?
Yeah. Well, hey.
Nice.
Everyone else is leaving, so it's gonna create a good environment for the people who are left at some point, right?
Yeah, well, we've got to give our young people a reason to want to stay here, and I think that is actually something that everybody in New Zealand should be thinking about. What is going to be our next great industry? We've had dairy that's done us pretty well from the 90s to here, but we need something else. We need something else to get people excited about, something else to get our young people to stay in New Zealand. Part of that is just having a thriving, diverse range of businesses. But another part of that is maybe leveraging like the new technologies, like the space sector, for example, and the opportunities that might actually be in those areas that we could really invest in.
Well, we've got so much knowledge. The interesting thing is we export the products that we grow at the moment.
That's right.
I talked about this at an event a wee while ago. McDonald's New Zealand imports pretty much zero physical product from McDonald's US. I'll bet you they spend hundreds of millions of dollars with them. How can we turn our knowledge of farming, as an example, or our knowledge of space or yachting or whatever it is, and start actually exporting knowledge? Because we can get knowledge across the world in seconds, and it is worth so much more than actually exporting the physical product. So I see that that's a huge opportunity for the people in New Zealand, and we've got those green shoots starting to emerge, the Xeros, the Rocket Labs. Mm-hmm. Here in Tauranga, we've got Lawview, a handful of other businesses. Rob, you'll no doubt be able to call out a whole bunch. I guess there's Company X over in the Waikato as well.
Yeah, I think you've got SIOS, the drone guys that have done doing really well, agricultural drones, and then into defence stuff as well. So it's pretty impressive. But
just on that,
right.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah,
just on that, though, you made a comment around making New Zealand an exciting place for our young people to stay. I spent 20 odd years in the public sector, more specifically in the health sector, and we ran a program once attracting high school students into the health sector because it's such a big behemoth, and people don't, apart from doctors and nurses, they don't understand what actually holds that organisation up. And one challenge we had was if we supported these students to come in-house and they went overseas, isn't that a big risk? And we said, no, isn't it marvellous if we can send a lot of our young people overseas, get a wider experience, knowledge, skill sets, but we need it exciting for them to come back and to add value. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that people leave, as long as we've got that come back and add value and they get excited, they can see where they can add value and sort of create their own businesses or opportunities to do that.
Totally. And I think I know a lot of my friends, I just ticked over 40 last year, but a lot of my friends, we all went overseas. We had overseas jobs and experiences. We all came back because ultimately New Zealand's a great place to raise a family. So there's still those things that we need to make sure we have right, because they are massive bonuses to living in such a beautiful country. And sometimes we actually forget about it. We're even right now, we're calling out all the things that are holding us back, because that's what this podcast is about, right? But ultimately, we live in a country where we still have a wonderful backyard. We can go to the ocean, the mountains, anywhere we want, really, within an hour or two. And there's got to be something amazing about that. I don't think there's many other places in the world that you can do that. And that's something that we obviously also need to really sell and remind people about as well. But I think, a lot of people, they can, young people particularly, can work within an industry, they can get an education, they can go off to another country, they can get that knowledge, they can come back and they can bring that back here. And actually, as you've reminded me, Rob, I was in Taiwan for work last week talking about trade, and that's exactly how Taiwan has been so successful. They sent a lot of the young people, did engineering, electrical, went off and learnt about semiconductors, computer chips, new technology over in the States, came back to their country, started businesses, and have actually now taken over globally to be the market leaders in semiconductor. And that's all from their young people going away and learning upskilling elsewhere and bringing that knowledge back. I think we can do both. I think we could do more of what Rob said, more of what David said, export how we farm. We're the cleanest, greenest farmers on the planet. That's amazing. People want to know how to do that. Our milk yield is really high, and yet we farm so sustainably. Other countries want to know how we do that, and we should be able to sell that and make that actually marketable.
It's those small things about New Zealand that we do forget that makes it such a cool place to live, work and play. I was reminded about that, I think it was late last year, playing golf with a South African dad. They've just moved over, and he was telling me how his children totally freaked out when they went to an open home, parked outside the house, and they turned around and went, "We're allowed to walk up to that house? Is it safe?" Just from the car to the house, because obviously where they came from, you go to a lot compound. So we forget about those small, just simple things in life that we do need to celebrate more rather than keep beating the negative stuff.
Totally.
So if we look ahead to the next election, what do you think ACT's SME agenda needs to centre on? And what should small business owners be watching for?
Yeah, look, I sort of alluded to some of this earlier in the piece, but I think one of the things that I'm watching is a lot of the business surveys that are coming out, whether it's from the Chambers of Commerce, New Zealand Business, MYOB released one recently, and there's an overall theme, you know, businesses are finding it tough because of the cost of living and just the cost of doing business in general. But there are some areas that I think the government can improve really quickly on. And I think some of those are on the areas of duplication for businesses, simplifying things, making sure that from a government side of things, we have a proper business hub where, say you want to start a new business, you can go in there, you can type the type of business in, and there'll be a list of things that you'll need to know in advance, you know, making it really easy for people. So some kind of hub that we can actually access this in. And I know MB have things, but it's all disjointed, it's all over the show, it's not easily accessible. Improving our government procurement and local government procurement so that we actually find New Zealand businesses that are getting the contracts, and that money that's generated from getting those contracts actually stays here in New Zealand, which would be a great start. And it wouldn't be every single contract, of course, but I think there are definitely ways our SMEs can be delivering. And one example I'll give you at the moment, because it is so hard to fill in these tenders, I met a painter, and he filled in one of the online procurement processes to repaint a swimming pool in a small rural town here in New Zealand, down in the South Island. And he really struggled to fill it in, couldn't actually complete some of the things that they were asking for because he just didn't even know what they were. So he ended up missing out on it. They awarded it to a larger contractor who was charging 4 times the price, who then went and got this little contractor to paint the pool, because he was the only one in the town that could paint the pool. So now the government and the taxpayers paying 4 times the amount for a painter to go and paint the pool. Like, this is actually ridiculous. What was it that we needed from this individual, this company, this small business, to know that they could do the job, they could do it well, and they could do it at an affordable price? That's really all the details that we needed, but we make it so hard, so complicated, that only big end of town can answer those questions. And then they, of course, just subcontract that work out. And this happens all across the board. So helping with that. And then I think looking at business tax is pretty high here in New Zealand. Could we do something like Ireland? Could we make it actually more attractive to have a business here by having a lower tax rate? Could we look at depreciation rates? Depreciation, whether it's on new purchases, whether it's on vehicles, whether it's on machinery, whether it's on anything that a business purchases. I think those are all areas we're looking at now. But of course, they have some big fiscal implications to budget. You've got to balance the books in the government. So those are where we're looking at the moment.
Only a few things.
Just a few. And look, there could be much more. I know there's a lot of things out there that businesses, wanting us to do. And some of those things we've done. And one of them was health and safety reforms. But of course, we're not going to see that. It's just finishing going through government right now. And the implementation of that won't really happen until next year. So we won't see those wins, those gains just yet from that. But I think that will have a massive impact on business. So I tell them just, hold in there, keep waiting for these things. Employment law stuff, the Holidays Act, all of that stuff's coming through right now that we'll see next year. It's all good stuff.
Okay, Laura, it is our final few questions, which are quickfire-ish. We've got an MP. It is quickfire, shortish
I know, I was going to say,
questions.
you should give me a time limit. I'm an MP. Who knows how long I could go on these?
Oh, yeah. Chris Pink went for ages. So, I mean, surely you can't be that long.
Nah, okay. I probably won't. There's a reason we're politicians, right?
Absolutely. Won't go into more on that. Right. First quick fire question. What's one regulation you would repeal tomorrow if you could?
Oh, there's so many of them. I'm going to pick one that I think is really important, and it would be around incorporated societies. The previous government updated their legislation. It's just come into effect this month, and it requires our little tiny small clubs, the grassroots organisations, to have to adhere to big corporation BS. And I would carve out for small societies. In fact, I've got a members bill to do it so that they don't have to adhere to big corporate rules if you're just running a little club on the ground.
Okay, brilliant. Going back to your previous life as a SME owner, what's one thing you would recommend SME owner can do this week that costs nothing but will lift their performance immediately?
Oh, I would say make sure your staff feel valued. It could be a real quick email, a quick text to someone who's been doing an excellent job. Maybe it's just the job that they do all the time and they always do a good job, but just let them know that they're appreciated. That little boost could be something that changes them putting in that little extra bit of 10 minutes work for you, the extra half hour, the extra hour. And I think making sure people know they're valued is really important. Set up a Worker of the Week award. I don't know, something silly. At the ACT Party, we do Freedom Fighter of the Week within our team. And I know that our staff, particularly the ones doing the hard yards behind the scenes, really appreciate having that. It also creates a little bit of competition, which I think is nice for productivity. So I'd say that would be great. The other thing you could do is use a bit of basic free AI to tidy up emails or summarize documents. That also helps. It's free and easy to do. Don't go crazy on it, though. Everybody knows when an email's written by AI, but, just a little bit of summarizing. Make sure it doesn't put the dashes in.
Yeah. Cool. There's research around that staff engagement as well. So if you do staff engagement really well, it lifts up product or performance by 19.6%. But that's on the side.
About 20% or something it is. And it can be real little stuff. It doesn't have to cost you money.
100%. Cool. Yeah. Okay. One that we talked about before we went live on this, your favorite book or your latest book that you really would recommend to another SMB owner?
Yeah, so one of the books that I've recently read is Habits of High Performers, and it's written by James Laughlin, who is a Irish expat living here in New Zealand in Christchurch, and he is a great motivational speaker. He also does performance coaching, and I've had a bit of performance coaching from him myself. But his book, it's basically 7 basic habits. Some of them are things that we should know and we should do, but some of them aren't that obvious. So, look, I highly recommend that book if you're into a bit of self-help and you want a bit of self-love. I think it's a good place to start.
Excellent. Well, we might ask for an introduction and we'll get them onto the show.
Yeah.
And the last question, the New Zealand business owner you most admire and why?
Oh, this is so hard. I mean, I could call out someone like Rocket Lab or the Zeros, but honestly,
Zero this week?
Yeah, maybe not Zero this. Look, we could call they have been extremely successful. Zuru Toys, they're doing incredible things, but the people that I actually admire the most are the mum and dad business owners that are juggling it all, getting up every day, getting kids off to school, having to go and operate a business at the same time. They could be a tradie, they could be a hairdresser, they could be doing almost anything, to be honest. Cafe owners, restaurant owners, but it's those guys. It's like the ones that I know are putting in all the hard yards. They've got a family at home. They would be my ones that I most admire right now.
Answered like a true good politician. Well done.
New Zealand's small and medium businesses are not asking for handouts. They're asking for a fair playing field, employment laws that reflect the reality of small team dynamics, a regulatory environment that doesn't punish growth, and a government that understands what it actually costs to hire someone, fire someone, and survive a slow quarter. What Laura has laid out is a perspective grounded in those realities. ACT's argument is straightforward, that the best thing government can do for a small business owner is to get out of the way, and then actively remove the obstacles it has already placed in the path. Deregulation is not an abstract economic concept. It's the difference between a business owner who wakes up thinking about customers and growth, or the one who wakes up thinking about compliance and legal exposure. There are 530,000 small and medium businesses and self-employed people in New Zealand. Each one is someone's livelihood, someone's identity, and someone's risk. The conversation we had today matters. The policies under discussion are going to determine the trajectory of a significant share of the New Zealand economy. Remember, the real edge is not the policy environment, it's the capability of the leaders inside our businesses. Government can clear the track, but you still have to run the race. Laura, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.